this whole hype was going on with AI. It was, oh wait, people cost don't matter. It's just token cost. So by the way, when you have a token cost, that's where I was bringing this podcast. They were saying like Anthropic today is charging for 1 million tokens $56, right?
Yeah.
Right? And then there are open source models that are available, large language models that are available, which are charging 56 cents for $1 million. Now you tell me what's the value? How are you going to explain to a customer? And that's why we made that choice that you should be LLM agnostic, right? Does it really? And at some point, if somebody goes start using these tokens again and again, and your basically costs go out of whack, are you really addressing the promise of AI, the cost faster, cheaper, better? You're not, right? Okay, so you have,
Absolutely.
and that's where, to me, this discussion of LLMs, the debate and the fighting out is a great thing, okay, because it all ultimately helps my customers.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Data Brew podcast. It is a podcast about anything related to data, technology, how it's being used in business, and how data people are using it. No hype, no buzzword bingo. Basically, I sit down with anybody that I feel that I respect in the industry, that has great opinions that I've heard about, and we get to talk about any topic they want. And today, I'm lucky to have not only an expert in the health industry, but a good friend of mine, Abhay Jajoo. Thank you for joining the Data Brew podcast.
Hey, Telmo, thank you for having me. It's really great talking to you after a long time, and especially on something like this forum.
I know we've been talking about it for so long. I mean, we, in one way or another, you and I have been, involved in data, in AI, in BI, in analytics, whether it's from an operational point of view or another. But Abhay, before we get started, can you tell me about your company or companies, because I know you have quite a few as well, but you've been the founder and CEO of one specifically, one that you're actually kind of your lead company.
Yeah. So thanks, Telmo. So I run a company called Customer Insights.ai, and this was founded in about 2018. And the genesis of this was we were looking at, and we are focused on life sciences, commercial analytics. So it's a very hyper vertical from that perspective. Not only it focuses on a certain industry, but also a certain set of use cases and problems, okay, which is related to selling and marketing of drugs by pharmaceutical companies. And our customers are pharmaceutical and biotech companies, okay? And I've been in the industry for about close to, on and off for about 40 years, and I've touched various aspects of that industry. So I understand the issues kind of at the back of my hand. And most of the problems that we have addressed for that in that industry is through consulting work, okay? Where you basically go and talk
Right.
to what your issues are, and then you kind of create a project and you bill and you solve their problem, right? And then you kind of put the project on the back burner and then you come back and solve the next problem, etc., right? And when you and I kind of worked together at one of our common alliances at that point was IMS Health, okay, we learned a lot about basically standardizing all the data management, okay, and how we can use kind of, because it's the same data that gets used everywhere by all our
Right.
customers, right? And it gets integrated in the same way, and then ultimately gets visualized in the same way, analyzed in the same way, with some nuances from different customers around their therapeutic classes or their patient population or their individual situation. But essentially, the data infrastructure is the same. So that's where we kind of, once I left IMS, that's where I said, look, wouldn't it be great if we could just have a product which basically ingests all these data sources and then transforms them in the standard way and also visualizes them depending upon the use cases. That's what we used to call apps, okay? So that different users can use and ingest this data in a common manner and get the answers faster. And since this process is all streamlined, instead of taking days to answer a question, you get like minutes to answer the question. And that was the genesis behind our company. We said, look, let's lead with product to address our problems of our customers, okay? And
And that I find quite innovative, because in the,
yeah,
and again, before that, let's define
mm,
health,
mm,
health sciences. Are we talking pharmaceutical? Are we talking,
correct.
the hospitals and the pharmacies? Are we talking about
Correct.
devices,
Yeah.
or a mix of both?
Yeah. That's a great point. So healthcare is like a big, like it's all like what, depending
Yes.
upon the numbers you say, it's like 1/3 of the economy or 1/6 of the economy, whatever that number, it's a big, right? But it has multiple segments. But here are the three big segments, if I want to call it. Like one is what is we call as the provider space, right? Which is the doctors and the hospitals, right? Where people go, the patients, the consumers of healthcare go and get their treatment or consultation or whatever it is, right? That's one part of the business. The other part of the business is insurance companies in the United States who pay for the services, right? And they're called the payers. So that's why you have providers, payers. And then the
Mm,
third big piece, okay, is the people who are providing medicines and of different natures, sometimes pill form, which is essentially pharmaceuticals, sometimes in the form of live agents or biotech products. So those are the biotech companies, and sometimes devices which are used. Okay, so there's med devices. So those are the three big buckets, right? Or we operate
right.
in the third bucket, okay, which is the life sciences. And even in life sciences, we focus on pharma and biotech, not med sciences. Okay,
Not my,
and because we are focused on helping those companies sell their products, okay, which means making sure that the right patient, because most of the prescription of drugs happens through doctors. Okay, so how do
right.
you convince doctors to write prescriptions? Okay, and how do you make sure that the patients take that what is prescribed? And how do you make sure that if somebody's on a drug and if it's a continuous care drug, then essentially they stay on the drug, right? So the sales and marketing organizations, which is what is called as commercial organizations in pharma, is what our focus is. And even
Right.
there is a whole kind of analytics department which analyzes the data and essentially trying to answer the questions: how do we get patients? How do we get patients on the drug? And how do we make sure that they remain on a drug? That's kind of the essential problem that we are solving, helping pharma companies analyze, right? But then there is a whole execution side of things, which is how do we because they have usually a lot of salespeople. So which doctors do we call on is an analytical problem, but when they call on someone, right, that is an operations problem, right? Same thing with marketing, right? You send emails out through variety of software tools and then operationalize that. That is the downstream problem. So we deal only with the
Right.
analytics side of the business. Okay. Mm,
And that to me, and I've always
mm,
tried to explain
mm,
the difficulty and the challenges we have with in the health and
mm,
specifically in pharmaceutical was unlike many other industries
mm,
where, if I sell a can of Coke, I know
yeah,
exactly at
mm,
any point in time
mm,
who made the decision, where it's stocked at, where is it
correct,
going, which
correct.
store is being sold out of, and
Yeah.
even the date and time,
Mm,
and
mm,
potentially some other data. But
mm,
with pharmaceuticals and most medicines,
mm,
you don't have that, right?
correct.
There's
Mm,
at all levels, whether it's
mm,
the U.S. or whether it's Europe or
yeah, yeah.
and many other countries, there's this abstraction of data,
Mm,
this protection of data,
correct.
and there's many
Mhm,
factors influencing the cell along the line.
correct.
Yes,
Mm,
the doctor, coming out of an operation, an intervention, the
mm,
hospital may prescribe this medicine,
mm,
but the GP may decide to change it over time,
correct.
and the
Correct.
pharmacist may decide again to flip it due
Correct.
to generics or due to the insurance, and the
Correct.
insurance itself has an impact in that. So there's many different
Correct. Mm,
gatekeepers and kind of influencers along the line, and
mm,
that is a huge challenge in health, right? It's
mm,
and
yeah,
pharmaceuticals specifically, um,
absolutely. Yeah.
and
Mm,
again, in terms of what the data, the collection of that data
yeah.
has been always limited, right, by
Correct.
those regulations, by those protections.
Yeah.
Has that changed over the years? I mean, I've been out of it for a long time now,
Yeah, broadly
with big
speaking, not.
data.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so short answer is no, right? And because there are kind of fundamental things that you cannot violate with this data, right? One is, I
Right,
mean, like, one is the privacy of the individual, right? Okay, and that is at least in the Western countries, that's sacrosanct. Okay, there's just nothing you can do about it, right? If a Telmo Silva has taken a prescribed pill, there is no way how much data you track. Telmo's name cannot show up anything. Yes, there can be way to
right,
identify you and de-identify the information that it was Telmo, but it is never available for anybody to use it. Okay, and
right,
so all the analytics it gets done on de-identified data or aggregations
Right.
of some kind. Okay,
Or
that's
aggregations, right?
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of like I'll give you one example, but there are other things like, for example, sales and marketing access. That happens in a very regulated manner. You can't willy nilly go and promote a product to a doctor. You have to have a certain script. You have to have certain compliance, and you cannot. And because I have to adhere to whatever is the evidence of the clinical trials that's available. So you can talk about
Right.
off-label use is common, but you cannot use that to promote. Right? So these are examples of things which you operate under a regulated environment. And the other thing you mentioned is the buying process is not as simple as write a prescription, go pick it up. Right? It goes through the
Mm,
pharmacy, and then in the United States, primarily for most drugs, basically there's a third-party payer involved, either the government or a commercial provider. So they need to go through the approval and the whole decision of switching at pharmacy. That stuff happens. Right? So which creates a third leg in the United States, which is very prominent. So you took a look at a commercial organization, which is like a sales organization, marketing organization. Now they're it's a sales and marketing, but the sales organization, because the sales forces are so big that they are called as sales organizations separately, because they are
right.
essentially on
Absolutely.
doctors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas marketing organizations are kind of driving marketing campaigns like speaker programs, emails, and other various ways of kind of reaching out to the doctors or their audience, right? So they separate them because they're totally different scales, right? But the third piece, which is becoming very, very important these days, back in your days probably was not that prominent even when in the United States. In the last 15 years it's become very important, is pricing access, right?
Mm,
Because these days it's very common for a drug to be switched if there are competitors available at the pharmacy based on the co-pays, or based on what's the preferred preference that the payer plan has for a particular drug. And a Lipitor could be switched to a Zocor could be switched to a Lipitor, even though the doctor might have written Lipitor. And if they say, look, it's against this, then you have to go through this whole process of prior auth, etc. Right? So
right.
that is becoming very, very important now, right? Back in the day, you would say, look, sales was all about just send a bunch of reps to the doctors. That was in the
Right.
90s. And then they said, okay, let's put the drugs once, the biggest product launch ever, which was Viagra, right? Which was a lifestyle drug. Since then, every drug started, at least in the United States, getting promoted on TV, for example, right?
Right.
But and then they started playing important roles. So you had to kind of advertise on TV. The people will come to the doctor's office, ask for the drug, and then doctors will prescribe it. So that was the theme, right? Now the
Right.
third piece is becoming very important: paying. So you can go talk to the doctor if the patient doesn't have the drug on their plan doesn't cover the drug, it's not going to be prescribed, right?
It's done.
And
Right.
yes, so that has become very important in the United States, which, by the way, is the largest market by far for, say, for pharmaceutical companies. Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
uh, so
So,
and
so
that's where
that
we
kind of,
operate. Yeah, yeah,
so that ties it all back
mm,
in
right,
when, we were talking about customer insights and
yeah,
the fact that there's a lot of services focus because
correct,
even
yeah,
within the same organization or same customer of yours, different drugs in different markets have,
yeah,
different data, different investments, different
correct,
sizes of market.
correct,
I mean,
yeah,
I've heard back again in my times that there was such an innovative
mm,
drug that was only for a very specific type of disease,
correct,
very rare disease, and the
correct,
drug was, the drug cost was like a hundred
correct,
thousand dollars, something
correct,
crazy,
correct,
because
yeah,
the company has to recoup his research investment,
correct,
right?
correct,
But there's not enough cases to use it.
correct,
So
correct,
that kind of determine. So each market and each drug kind of has its own kind of
mhm.
little uh,
So
properties that kind of affect. So that explains a lot of the
mm,
knowledge that you bring into your customers. And
correct,
and now once with your expertise and your team's expertise
mm,
of this, what are the tools? What are the data?
correct.
And we're gonna have to talk about AI eventually, right?
No, no, even no, and
So it's gonna come in, but
yeah,
I'm kind of leading
yeah,
to that because that's
mm,
where I'm interested in.
correct,
Is
correct,
I know that the data
mhm,
is high volume data. It is kind of
mm,
monthly data for the most part.
mm,
It's basically about sales across
mm,
every single outlet or pharmacy
mm,
across a country. For example, in the U.S., which
mhm,
is a tremendous amount of data for
mm,
the competitors, for the drug of the company itself.
mm.
What other types of data are there? And now how does your team tackle that at a high level?
Correct.
And, what tools are used in that place? And specifically about your tool and the product you've developed.
Correct. So, first of all, I think you laid it out very, very well. Okay. The volume to me is any database at the end of the day is a bunch of rows and columns. Let's just say that, right? So to me, volume is all about number of rows, usually, because columns are not that many. I mean, there's only so many columns you can create, right? Okay. Uh, in rare diseases, that, let's say, even if you can, which is the one example that you use, the data could be pretty much 10,000 patients, let's just say. And those are usually going to, let's say, 1,000 doctors. Right? So your rows are like very small, right? But
You
the
could use
drawing
Excel for that, right?
process and everything makes it very, very complex. Okay. So when people, so that's on the rare disease. And even on on like a mass market product, let's say a diabetes product or a cholesterol product, right? Let's say you have millions of patients, right? And you usually don't get patient level data, but I'll talk about that in a second, okay? But let's say there are 100,000 doctors who are most relevant to you. Of those, only 70, 80% are going to be of relevance. So again, the rows are not that much, okay? 100,000 row database is nothing in today's world,
Mm,
right? But the
agreed.
complexity comes, so to me, the complexity comes not from volume, it comes from variety, okay? Because there are different, and as you laid out in the steps, the variety is what. So when you look at talk about big data and the complexity, big data is used to display complexity. To me, it's not the complexity of the rows. The complexity is in the different natures of the columns and how they get integrated, etc. Right? And that's where you are talking about like specific disease areas that have different columns. I'm talking database language to you now, right? So and some columns may be
Thank you.
relevant, they will be coming from different sources, and now you need to integrate them differently, make sure they are working together, and ultimately the users are getting good insights from them, right? And
Right.
relevant, when I say good, they make sense, they're good, they are impactable, they're actionable, right? All those things, because that's the business we are in, which is to take all this gobbledygook of data, right, for lack of a better word, and make sure that they get the right decision, they can make right decisions using this data. Okay. So that is what basically, that's the kind of context I want to set with you. So
Right.
now, when you look at that, essentially what we have done is our first product is called Parthenon, which essentially takes all, and by the way, all these data sets ultimately have patterns. Okay, right? I mean, there is a prescription data for cholesterol lowering data versus any other has the same rows and same columns, right? Okay, 24 months
Right.
of prescriptions, etc. Right? There is no need for you to have a specialized ingestion of this data. You just need to know, well, where is my data? And I know it's going to have 24 months of data or 48 months of data, whatever it is. And these are the
Right.
columns which are very well defined, right? So we can then kind of standardize this across industries, across companies for the industry, right? So that's what we've done with. So Parthenon was our first product, which was essentially taking all these standard patterns, standard data sets, which include prescription data that you mentioned, which has now something much more richer, which is called claims data, which goes like, which
Mm,
is much, much more in terms of volume, because it kind of
right.
tries to be at the patient level, but it's not at the doctor level. And then you have CRM data, which is the activity of the sales and marketing organization, which could be in different systems. It has also information from, because reps are involved, HR systems, etc. Right? So these are all, by the way, standard approaches to looking at standard
Right.
data tools which come in, but different companies will have it in. So they may be stored in one place in AWS, one would be stored in Databricks, one could be sitting in like flat files, Excel, you name it, right? So those are kind of
Right.
the standard. So what we've done is we've taken like the approach of ability to ingest all of them, transform them, create derived variables, because derived variables are very important in making decisions, and then developing standard visualizations or workflows, okay, which is what we call as an app, okay, so that the different users can use it in the right way, but it's coherent one database. And then we can also run machine
Gotcha.
learning and AI algorithms to generate not only insights which are reactive, but also predictive, right? So that's kind of the
Right.
idea. So that is Parthenon. That was our first instance, right? Now, in the last year and a half, what we've done is we've taken like, and by the way, that particular product is ready to deploy, ready to install. You basically buy it as a subscription, and people can, and all you have to do to install that is just tell me where your data is, and we'll basically just
Right.
connect to it, and boom, it just gets installed, right? So that works very well into small to medium pharmaceutical companies. Okay, now in in our world, there is large pharma. They have already invested a lot in these data infrastructures. Now, they're not usually in kind of integrated and clean as what I just described to you in Parthenon, but they're sufficiently good enough, is what I would say. And there's a sunk
Understood.
cost to what they've invested. So what we realized last year, once the agentic approaches started happening and kind of came to light, was what we could do is, instead of building these ingestion, transformation, and these what we call as workflow items, for lack of a better word, okay, we could have actually agents which could do the ingestion, which could do the and these are not agents, are not necessarily RPA. It's not a robotic process automation. It's actually intelligent.
Right.
They are understanding what is the environment of the client, what data needs to be done. So these are every time I talk about an agent, it's an intelligent agent. It has built-in intelligence, right? So we could build intelligent agents to doing each of these steps, okay, and we could have a orchestration layer which can just orchestrate all of them. And then the final good thing about it is, which is the simplified version of the entire and user interface, is all about conversation then, right? So then the training costs and adoption costs go down for our customers, because they are just asking questions, because now with the advent of ChatGPT and those kinds of LLMs interfaces, customers are
Yeah.
used to asking questions, right? So that is the idea
Absolutely.
behind Athena, which is what we developed. And now we have taken, so we had about 40 applications on our Parthenon. We're slowly rolling them all out as use cases in our Athena product. And very important
Okay.
part that we need to understand is two or three things which are, and this is an architectural decision. I know I, Telmo, you and I have architectural discussions. To me, architecture is ultimately what triumphs every technology, right? I mean, you can have
Right.
variety of
Absolutely.
tools. There's are different stages of evolution, but if you architect your solution right, everything works, okay, because they, and so what we have done is we have architected it so that it's data agnostic, it's infrastructure agnostic, right? It is also LLM agnostic, okay, and it is also what I call as uh, basically the entire stack, database as well, and whatever is the customer's supporting infrastructure, security roles, everything, all that agnostic. So, right, what we
Nice.
have as our IP is, okay, ultimately we realized is our ability to understand the data, kind of metadata of pharma, right? So that is our IP, which is
Mm, mm.
our our ability to build workflows of analyzing this data, right? Depending
Right.
upon the use case. And then the third thing is our learnings, our standard operating procedures, so to speak, on when somebody asks a question, is what are the sequence of things that we need to invoke to ask questions. That is our
You've
IP.
injected. You've
And that is
injected that.
something that
Right.
basically we have built, okay, in Athena. And then now we have our architectures, we can deploy it anywhere, which can plug in, and it checks all the boxes, right? In terms of, is it secure? It's deployed on the customer, so the data doesn't leak out, and those kinds of things. The most important, the final piece, which is very important, and this is the danger of, and I think you mentioned this in some of your earlier podcasts, is like hallucinations, right? And it's like giving a right answer to a wrong question, or wrong answer to a right question, or almost a right answer to a wrong question, whatever combination you come up with is dangerous. It's really
Yeah.
is dangerous. Okay. Now, in the sales and marketing, in the marketing arena, maybe it's not that dangerous, because one wrong email is not a bad, it doesn't have consequences, but wrong messages sent to the wrong audience, which is not approved, etc., can be dangerous.
Right.
And sometimes
Absolutely.
if you're making a multi-million-dollar investment decision based on our analytics and you hallucinate, it could just be completely wrong. So
Yeah.
that is important, right? Yeah.
I keep talking about
Yeah.
hallucinations, and I
Yeah.
think those are things that
Yeah.
over time the teams will kind of
Mhm.
perfect and the different models will tackle.
Exactly.
I also get concerned a lot about
Mm.
security
Yeah.
and guardrails of
Correct.
how far does he go. That's always
Mm.
a concern, or at least a topic that I love discussing.
Yeah.
I love discussing LLMs, and one
Right.
thing that you said that
Yeah.
kind of triggered a little question for me. I fully get it that, and
Mhm.
you need to be
Mm.
considering the the evolution of cloud and
Mm.
storage and so forth, that
Correct.
you are agnostic to databases, which is great. Agnostic to cloud, that's great.
Yeah.
The piece I did not quite understand is agnostic to LLM.
Yeah.
I know that certain
Mhm.
LLMs
Mm.
are better. I mean, we've heard in the
Correct. Correct.
recent
Correct.
last 2 weeks alone, the fight between Anthropic and
Correct.
OpenAI,
Correct.
and kind of the
Mm.
OpenAI got
Mhm.
kind of became a hacker on the net, and it's kind of escaped its sandbox
Yeah.
and things like that. And there's evolutions, and as well,
Mm.
the
Mm.
US
Mm.
closing off certain models to outside
Mhm.
companies, and even within the US to certain
Mhm.
companies.
Mhm.
There are differences in models, right?
Correct.
And in your team, have you now kind of um start looking at other different profiles to supplement your team,
Uh,
to better pick models, to know how to work with the models?
yeah.
Is there more prompt engineering as opposed to
Mm.
SQL engineering in the past? Like, how
Yeah.
has that transformed your company and the
Mm.
people within your company?
Yeah. So I'm not, I think the prompt engineering, SQL engineering is a bit like one level below my kind of level. I understand it at high level, but I'll let you.
Right,
And I'll probably and I'll not be an expert in that, so I'll just leave it. But here's the at a high level. Let's just understand what we mean by LLM, right? What the LLMs are doing at the end of the day is the following, right? Okay, customer asks a question, right? Types in a question, and essentially what you have is now we need to get an answer to that question, right? And we have a bunch of agents ready to answer those questions, right? Okay,
right,
which we also know based on the nature of the question what the workflow is going to look like. That's fine, right?
right,
But what happens is the answers come out, and look, writing an answer, getting an answer is a bunch of SQL queries, which can be done, implemented, and you can optimize that. That's not an issue, right? Interpreting that and then giving insights and answer is the big challenge, right? Because that
right.
otherwise you might as well just put a bunch of drop down menus and get the answer, right?
Of
That's not what
course,
you
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So where the number one use of a what I call as an LLM is essentially around work looking at this data and being trained on the data that we are on right now. Okay.
Okay,
And using our standard operating procedure documents, which is usually describing, which is like depending upon the use case, they are different, right? And they are RIP.
right,
And to use that to kind of guide the prompts, etc. Right. So we have
right. So you
simplified
feed,
it from
yeah.
that perspective. Okay. Yeah.
So you basically feed
Mhm.
all the knowledge
Mhm.
and experience and
Mm,
to a certain extent
mm,
functionality that you built on Parthenon,
yeah,
using people, using tools. Now you've kind of moved away from that and injected it
yeah,
into an LLM, basically, and agents that kind
correct.
of have that knowledge in those tools. So we've evolved
Yeah.
really from,
Mhm,
I'm going to say, a SaaS product to,
mm,
it's still a SaaS product in a sense, but
mm.
it's powered by LLMs and
Well,
AI.
yeah,
Okay, all right,
exactly, exactly.
gotcha.
So,
So
I
yeah,
just gave you my secret sauce away, so just make sure my competitors don't see it. But I get it. But you got the idea.
well, we can talk about it all we want, but
Mm,
doing it is the hard part, right? I
exactly.
think
Thank you.
everybody knows that,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, the world is evolving around,
yeah,
changing from
yeah,
data pipelines and scripts,
yeah,
and having one or two people
yeah,
having all the knowledge around how
yeah.
the data in the company works, to
Hmm.
actually kind of saying, okay, how
Hmm.
can we document this and have a machine do this, and then you
Yeah,
know uh,
mm,
and it's not necessarily, at least in my view,
yeah,
about cost cutting, about saying, oh, I no
mm,
longer need these people. It's just about
yeah,
business continuity, business improvement,
correct.
you know uh
Mm,
just getting to the next evolution.
okay.
The machines just go much faster and better, right? So let's
Yeah.
do that, and
Mm,
let's leave the job of interpreting that to the people. That's
mm,
where we need their brain, not in building these
correct.
things. So
So,
I think,
right.
and again, it's
Mm,
easier said than done, right? I
right.
mean, your secret
Then
sauce is safe.
let me. I was a bit flip when I said that. Trust me, I'm a big believer in kind of sharing information. Those who execute, they win, right? And it's okay for all of us.
Absolutely.
If our customers win. I think. Let me just double click on one point you mentioned, which is important, and I missed that, which was the debate between Anthropic and OpenAI and all that stuff, right? I was just listening to a podcast recently, and essentially, see, at the end of the day, adoption is driven by three things, right? uh, better, faster, cheaper, right? And all three has to happen, right? Okay.
Right.
And if you look at compared to the status quo at the end of the day, so status quo is today people-driven processes, right, etc. Right now, what you can say is, listen, my promise is I'll get you all these insights in like seconds, as hours, as days. Fine, okay.
Mm.
It's going to cost you like double that money. Doesn't work because that's not innovation in my view, right? Okay, because the customer could say, listen, I can wait 2 days and pay half the money, right? It doesn't matter, right? So point is that. So where I'm going with that is in this entire discussion, okay, better and faster is always possible through technology, right? And that's where the great promise of AI is, right? The question is going to come down to people and the cost. And the cost is the people cost, and I call the token cost, which is what Satya is also talking about, and everybody's talking about. To date,
Right.
when this whole hype was going on with AI, it was, oh, wait, people cost don't matter. It's just token cost. So by the way, when you have a token cost, that's where I was bringing this podcast. They were saying, like, Anthropic today is charging for 1 million tokens $56, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then there are open source models that are available, large language models that are available, which are charging 56 cents for $1 million. Now you tell me what's the value? How are you going to explain to a customer? And that's why we made that choice that you should be LLM agnostic, right? Does it really? And at some point, if somebody goes start using these tokens again and again, and your basically costs go out of whack, are you really addressing the promise of AI, the cost faster, cheaper, better? You're not, right? Okay, so you have,
Absolutely.
and that's where, to me, this discussion of LLMs, the debate and the fighting out is a great thing, okay, because it all ultimately helps my customers. As a matter of fact, my team is running R&D on right now on what is called as SLMs right now, which is a big deal. See, the
Hmm.
of LLM is these frontier models which can address the world's problem. But my pharma problem is a very small subset of the world's problem. It doesn't need these
Absolutely. Right.
million weights or whatever you go, and closed weights, open weight, all that stuff. I need probably
Right.
2,000 weights to run everything, okay, in my narrow use case.
Absolutely.
And it could be
With a
probably,
fraction of the power.
and
Yeah,
it could be
exactly.
5 cents a million tokens, which could be enough for me, right? And that's number one. So that's kind of just the use of generative. The second learning that is important is that your token cost over time has to be going down, okay? Which means, and every enterprise that's doing it has to figure out, that means the learnings of the industry as well as the learnings that are specific to your company has to be captured so that your token gets better over and over time, right? So
Right.
it is getting better, right? So that
Yeah,
can only happen through industry knowledge, right, and learning, okay.
absolutely. Right.
So that's why, to me, the two things exist together. People and token will always exist together. The token costs have to drop. That's going to come through standardization of the LLMs or whatever, even going towards things like open source or SLMs. And the second piece is the the tokens itself will become better and better, right? So instead of
Right.
taking 10 things to do something, they would just in one token do everything, right? So,
Right.
I'm kind of exaggerating, but that's kind of the
No, I
message
get
I'm
I
trying
get
to get.
what you're trying to say. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
I get
Mm,
a question that
mm,
basically, we're being,
mm,
asked and
mm,
consistently, and we're challenging ourselves to identify
mm,
um, whether we're hitting a wave. So I was talking
mm,
to a friend of mine over the holidays, and the first thing he tells me is, "Hey, you know what?
mm,
right? I don't know anything about Python, but I hopped on OpenAI, and I
mm,
was able to build these amazing dashboards and this data and stuff. And I have
mm,
no idea if, I never learned Python." But he built this great thing for
mm,
me in Python, and I said, "Well,
mm,
you still don't know Python. That's the first thing, but that's good. That's good that you were able to do that."
mm.
But what I'm starting to see, and I think you and I have been around the block a few times, we have these cycles of software,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Centralization, decentralization, cloud, not cloud,
mm,
hybrid.
mm,
There's always these waves, and
mm,
now we're starting to see a brand new wave of customers potentially and people within companies saying, well, why am I paying
mm,
somebody else,
mhm.
whether it's for services or for software?
Correct,
Why do I need a CRM system? I just told my ChatGPT to build me a CRM system, and
correct,
boom, look at this. He built me a
correct.
program, and I
Yeah.
still don't know anything about Python, but he did
Mm,
it, right?
mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
and and what are you being faced with that where you go to customers and saying, here we've collected years of
Mm,
experience on these, we've injected these agents with knowledge,
mm,
we have these things ready to go, these orchestrators,
mm,
and then they're kind of looking at you and go, well, we can do the same thing. If you can
correct,
do LLM, so
correct,
can we, right?
correct, correct.
um and I think that we're hitting this wave of
Uh-huh.
um self-confidence within certain users,
Yeah.
that say we can do better, etc.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that?
So great question. And by the way, that's the number one issue we're facing today, right? And here's the funniest part about this, because I have friends who have kind of tried, gone through. See, pharma luckily is a bit behind and they're slow adopters of technology for good reason. And this is not
Right.
it's not a criticism of them. That's how they work, right? Okay. But there are other industries where they have gone down this path. Okay, we can build it, and the lessons of the building show up right away, right? Okay, it's great to build but maintain. Right. I mean, simple things, right? Okay, so let's say a bug shows up, are you going to rerun the whole prompt engineering and just deploy a new set of code? Obviously people are coming around to that, but point I'm making is that, right? So I think eventually the where I see the point of arrival is going to be happy balance of what I call as enough innovation that can happen within the company versus what I call as industry specific providers like us, okay? Where our value will be to bring these standardized, ready to deploy, okay? Uh,
Mm.
Software tools, models, okay, which has the industry knowledge, which is ready to, right? Which can be maintained. And then for us to then tailor it to their needs, and for the customers to kind of tailor it to their needs, is essentially going to be where the happy medium is going to be. Today, I can tell you right now, for multiple reasons, the build ourselves thing is kind of the overwhelming kind of
Yeah, sense, right? Yeah.
flavor of the season. And then that's for two reasons. One is, which is like the money that is coming into AI from the board level, let's say, it's all going and say, we got to do something about AI. Okay, great. So who are the right people to doing this? The CIOs or the IT office, person's office. Okay, great. Here's the bunch of money. Now, from our experience, CIOs and IT officers are great people. They are very good in maintaining what is already built. They are not
Hmm.
necessarily the best innovators. Okay, it's as
Right.
simple. Right? So, and if they are trying to solve a business problem, which we are kind of addressing, what is the first thing they do? Hey, go talk to business and try to understand what their use cases is, gather the requirements, blah, blah, blah. And here's a
Come back.
6-month
Right.
project on just requirement gathering, etc. Right? So guess what? And by the way, while you're experimenting, spend a bunch of tokens on just figuring out the right tool, etc. Right? And the
Right.
budget is gone, right? And then you say, oh God, 5 months in, we have nothing to show for. And by the way, we hired these IT consultants who don't understand business, who are basically who are also called catching on to this wave, which is, oh, we're going to deploy forward deployment engineer, which is basically a bunch of
Right.
people, right? Oh, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just
No,
explaining the
but
situation.
I get what you're
Yeah,
saying,
and,
right?
and
Yeah.
and so where I think the answer build is where everybody's trying to go. I think the wave is come where we're going to come and say, like, this doesn't work. This is not effective, cost effective, and it is not
Right.
something we can deploy in production and kind of get value out of it. Okay, and that's where it's going to move. Okay, and it's going to be a
It,
happy balance
it's
thing. So, yeah, yeah,
It's interesting. I
yeah.
was on a podcast with
Mm,
Barak, the
mm,
great company of data analysts and BI and AI.
correct.
And I was talking to Carsten, and he asked me a similar question. What's going to happen to Quick Data? Is Quick
Mm,
Data gone? Right? I
mm,
mean,
yeah.
is are people just building themselves?
Mm,
And I think you and I have a
mm,
similar,
mm,
potentially from different angles, but
mm,
yeah, I would agree that the typical application will disappear,
mm,
but I think the engine blocks, by us supplying these little engine blocks to
mm,
our
mm,
customers, and then they integrate into their own
mm,
AI
mm, mhm,
program. I
mm,
think that's where I think is the most value,
correct. Mm,
because there are things that need guardrails, there are things
mm,
that need security, there are things that don't need hallucinations, there are things that
correct. Correct.
there's specificities,
Yeah.
and on top of it, in your case, there's
Mm,
also the knowledge of the industry baked into it, and
correct.
all these things could be just, again, you put it as agents or however you want to put them, but at
Correct.
the disposable of the users, of the customers,
Correct.
that they can use their own LLMs or their own
Exactly.
chat GPTs, and do with it what they will, but
Exactly.
in a manner that is
Mm.
correct, standard,
Mm.
operational,
Good. Mm.
efficient, etc.
Mm.
This is great. I mean, there's so much stuff that I really kind of wanted to cover. I made a list of stuff, and then
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm even past point three, to be honest.
Mm.
But let me see here. Let me see if I can find something that is actually
Mm.
um, what in recent in talking to customers in kind of in the news, etc. What do you feel is kind of the next step of AI? Now you talked about Athena, which is now the agentic intelligent agent and the orchestrator. Is there something beyond that? Do you see something in the future coming in, either for the industry or in general for data analytics and processing engineering, anything like that?
Uh, mm, I think I don't know, to be honest, but I think the innovation, the way I see it, is essentially three cycles, right? And this is pretty much following the script of the web innovation, just so that you know, right? It's basically right now the infrastructure one and what I call as the horizontal providers. Okay, to me, LLM providers, data providers, all those guys are horizontal providers, right? They are not vertical. They are not hyper vertical,
Right,
right? So the innovation is all happening in the infrastructure layer, the NVIDIAs and everybody,
right,
Google's, they're all kind of data center, whatever it is. Like at the end of the day, they are fighting that battle. Okay, and we are about a year away from kind of, and that is going to get shaken out because it's a scale capex business. Okay, that's what it is, right? The second one is going to be horizontal again, which is primarily a capex business, but it is going to have niches, right? Okay, and
mm,
so the Databricks and the Snowflakes and for the data infrastructure, the CRM, etc. All those will basically become some kind of agentified and will have intelligence based on that, right? So instead of just you going and querying, you will get talk to agents. You know? Now, whether it
right.
will lead to efficiency, performance is a different discussion, but that's something, right? The third wave of innovation to me is going to be these what we call as hypervertical companies, right?
The
Which is
verticals,
like
yeah.
solving problems specific to that particular niche and getting better and better and better at that, right? Okay, and they will basically operate on their own separate scale and a kind of trajectory of innovation, right? And
I think
I
that's
think
very
that's
true,
where
actually.
you'll see
Yeah.
very decentralized innovation. Okay, you're going to see that, and that to me is about 2 years away. Okay, and
Right.
then I don't know what comes next is a totally different thing. Okay,
No,
but
but I firmly agree with it. I start
yeah,
seeing some innovation in certain
yeah,
verticals,
yeah,
legal, medical, etc.
yeah,
And I think you're so onto that because I do believe, and I was
yeah.
actually surprised that we haven't had that already.
Mhm,
But I do think that, as you pointed
mm,
out, there's
mm,
innovation in these first layers,
mm,
and this constant changing and kind of
mm,
who's
mhm,
better,
mm.
etc., is causing some sort of a paralysis
Correct.
as to, okay, which way am I going to go? Which
Yeah,
provider am I going to go? Which
yeah,
infrastructure am I going to go with?
yeah.
But as soon as the dust settles, as you say, I
Mm,
think that's where we start seeing, okay,
correct,
that's fine. Okay, now it's for sure. You
correct.
know, it's
Mm,
like the point of saying, do
mm.
I go IBM or do I go Microsoft? And then all of a sudden IBM disappears and everybody goes Microsoft, right? And
Exactly.
then every year there's that little
Correct.
that little thing.
Correct.
Um, Abhay,
And
thank you very
before you
much.
close,
Oh,
that's why
sorry,
the
yeah,
choice of the architecture for the hyperverticals to be agnostic to that is a very important one. But doesn't mean, I mean, the trade-offs are pricing, the trade-offs are performance. So don't get me wrong. But that
absolutely.
architecture, that's why to me, architecture reigns supreme, right? Everything else comes back after to that. Okay.
I'm glad we still have that after so many years together. That
Yeah.
architecture design is quite important.
Yeah.
Um, it's
Yeah.
it's it's the thing that will save you that technical debt down the line. It's that
Correct.
thing that
Correct.
will save
Yeah.
huge pains in not only in compliance but in
Yeah.
even in your team's development to be faster to
Correct.
be able to scale up faster. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we still share that belief as one of the beliefs. That's great.
Yeah.
Um,
I
thank you,
learned from
Abhay,
you,
for spending
Telmo.
some time.
I learned from you, just so that you know.
I don't think so. We learn from each other.
Okay, great.
I thank you, Abhay. Thanks
Take
to
care.
all the viewers and listeners for
And
tuning into this podcast.
thank you.
As always, I hope it added some value to
Mm.
your work, to your knowledge. I'm happy to hear back from you. Just get into the comments feed or just write to me personally at telmo.silva@clickdata.com. Happy to know more about what you thought of this podcast. Until next time, this is the Data Brew Podcast.